Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being with us this evening. The title of our gathering tonight, the theme, is Coming to Calm in the Midst of Chaos. And there certainly is a lot of chaos that all of us are experiencing in whatever part of the world we're tuning in from. And learning practices and tools that can help us come back to a state of steady presence within ourselves is not only something that's so important for our own well-being, but is also an incredible expression of service to the people around us. In our peaceful presence, when we can get there, other people can often find a place of center and peace in themselves as well. I thought we would begin this evening with an excerpt from a poem that, when I first read it a couple of months ago, really touched me. It is by Rosemary Watola Trummer, whose poetry I have shared with you in these gatherings before. She's a poet from Colorado and has become one of my favorite poets. And in this excerpt, she says, "When I think I can't ache anymore, the world serves more heartache, and I meet it. I say no, but I feel myself stretched by some great invisible hand, rendering me spacious enough to hold what must be held." So we are here together tonight to perhaps be that invisible hand for one another that gently allows us to stretch and expand our inner container so that we too can hold what must be held, so that we can be a presence of peace and sanity and love in this world. I'm so thrilled to be sharing this evening with Nancy Napier. Nancy is a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist in private practice here in New York City. And Nancy is the author of several wonderful books, including my favorite, which is called Sacred Practices for Conscious Living. She is a faculty member of the Somatic Experiencing Training Institute and has taught somatic experiencing, a trauma resolution training, for 12 years. Currently, Nancy offers webinars for professionals that include trauma-based interventions, spiritually oriented interventions, explorations of optimal future self interventions, and more. Nancy is also part of the faculty of One Spirit's seminary training and our interspiritual counseling training. And the times that she comes each year to share with our students are always one of the highlights of the year. So please welcome Nancy Napier.
Okay, here I am. So I was just saying, excuse me, what a delight to be here. And I do want to say one thing about the view here in my living room. You'll notice shelves. Those shelves belong to the felines. There may or may not be one or two or three of them at some point this evening. But I've had people ask, why don't you put books on your bookshelves? No, they are not bookshelves. So I thought that a good way to begin would be for us as a collective to settle in for a moment and set the field, set the energy field for our time together. So I'd like to invite you just to follow your next out breath down into your body. Just not even to work at it, just follow the exhalation. Notice where you land in your body. And I want to invite you to become aware of the fact that in your body, there is a center of your own internal sense of gravity, centeredness, presence. And just notice what you experience as you give yourself permission simply to settle. There is in this internal center of gravity a steadiness that is always present. We often aren't aware of it because it falls into the background of awareness, but it's always there, unflappable, imperturbable. This is the part of us that cannot be disturbed. And even when we're activated and distressed, that steadiness is there in the background, almost as if you could lean into it and just allow yourself to find some internal support. Also notice your skeleton, your spine, particularly from the base of your skull all the way down to the base of your spine, to your tailbone. The supportive presence of your skeleton is your internal infrastructure of support. So just bringing awareness to it. There's nothing to do, nothing to change really, just settling in. And then notice the surface supporting you. And I'm going to get a cough drop while I'm talking. Notice how your body receives the support that is available for you right now, because it's very important to remember that support is a reciprocal process. Support is offered, and then support is received. So notice how your body receives the support available right now. And excuse me, cat allergy. I'd ask you to expand your awareness also to include all of us as one energy organism. That when we come together this way, we generate one energy organism of support. Each of us contributes to and draws from this collective supportive presence. Because it can really help to remember that we're never alone. We are part of collective consciousness in many iterations, many ways that we engage larger fields of support and awareness. And so just touching back into your own core, touching back into your own steady presence, however that touches you. Let yourself orient back out to the environment you're in, kind of looking around, but notice if you can resonate with a sense of us. a sense of all of us here together. And now that I have my cough drop, you know, it's crazy, I know, to live with 3 cats when you have a cat allergy, but you know how it is. You pick relationship over reasonableness. So now that I have my cough drop, my voice is going to be all right. One of the things actually that Diane and I had talked about when we were putting this kind of theme together was that the one thing we have available, and sometimes it's really the only thing we have available, is an awareness of this exact moment right here, right now. That sometimes all we have to draw on is the awareness that right now in this breath, sitting here, I can acknowledge that I am okay enough. And I'm going to have as an underlying theme in what I'd like to share with you tonight is an emphasis not only on the body and settling in, but the awareness that our self-talk is crucially important to how well we're able to come back into a flow of settling when we get stirred up. Self-talk is self-hypnosis, and it's really worth remembering that. So what I'm going to ask you to kind of weave in as I talk about a lot of different pieces here is, what statements can you generate for yourself that are true enough that they become a kind of landing place when you settle inside? So I was just saying, taking a breath and saying, in this moment, I'm okay enough. That's only going to work if it feels true. So you want to find your self-talk to hold ideas and thoughts that are true enough to allow you to settle into what you're telling yourself. One of the things that I've always used as a way to support myself is I imagine that what for me, now this for me is a reality, it may not feel this way to you, but I sense into a field of infinite stillness that I experience to be right behind every thought, every action, every sensation, that here's all the upfront expression of any kind. And then there is stillness. It's not emptiness, it's just stillness. And you can lean into that stillness just to catch a little moment of support and breathing. I'll sometimes even do that when I'm teaching, and just kind of lean into the stillness in my awareness to allow myself to feel a support that can't be lost. When we did this little bit of settling in, there really is inside each one of us a place that is never disturbed. It's part of that quality of what we're talking so much about these days, of embodied core presence. We all, every one of us, whether we're aware of it or not, have a landing place inside that is our core home base. And it's worth cultivating an awareness of that internal steadiness, even if you're not feeling it fully, to have with you then when you're out and about and you get activated. It's really helpful to have a place to land inside. And you know how they've always said, practice this when you don't need it, so it's there when you really do. So I recommend just, you know, in your morning practices, whatever you do, get used to just landing in yourself, letting gravity actually be your friend and bring you in. Activation, as we teach in the trauma trainings, activation moves up. Have you ever noticed when you're tense, you're going to be like this? So you want to have awarenesses that bring you down to the lower body, down into the core of yourself. You just start to track and notice if you're up here, what can help you come down. And I'm going to give you lots of specifics a little later on about ways to do that. But one of the things that I have found important during this time of so much distress, and I think we're all aware that the distress in our human family is planetary. Every continent, every country, there's no one place that has a market right now on our levels of activation and distress. So for me, one of the things that I depend on is to find sources that allow me to see a bigger picture, to find sources of inspiration, to give me a wider view so I'm not narrowing in. Trauma narrows. It narrows our perspective. It narrows what we're able to think about. So finding ways that expand what helps you feel like, okay, this is awful and there's a bigger picture. It's not to ignore or do a spiritual bypass, but just to expand. And one of the things that I learned, and this is not news, it's a science fact, there is a dynamic on the planet called emergence. And emergence is where nature pulls things together during times of change in ways that one would never imagine. And the example I use of emergence that always gives me just that feeling of there is a bigger mystery going on here than I will ever grasp in my conscious awareness is, how did the planet figure out to bring together 2 molecules of oxygen and 1 molecule of hydrogen, all air molecules? Who figured out that if you would bring those together, you'd get water? What wisdom, what creativity, where did that come from? So I kind of, when I start to feel really squeezed, I go, wait a minute, okay, this is awful, and there's a bigger mystery I don't know about yet that brings things together in combinations that are not linear, that we don't understand, that are beyond our everyday thinking. So I encourage you to find what sources of, whether they're talks on YouTube, or what I do every morning while I'm getting ready is I take my little MacBook Air around with me and I watch inspiring videos on YouTube. That's how I start the day. And we'll get to what are the other actual practices you can do, but I think having a bigger consciousness, as Diane said in the introduction, we're part of a collective consciousness, and every one of us who can find a quality of steadiness is contributing that to the collective. Now, the other side of that is, if we're distressed and activated, we're resonating with collective distress and activation. And I've been kind of a nut job lately, asking people to be very mindful of what frequencies are you resonating with? Where is your self-talk and the food you're giving yourself? What frequencies is that aligning you with? Because it's going to matter. If I'm getting frightened about something, my fear resonance is going to just be joining a collective massive fear resonance. But if I find a little bit of steadiness, I'm going to be resonating with collective steadiness. So that's where I was mentioning earlier that the self-talk is orienting us to certain frequencies and states of being that are going to be more or less helpful. There's one dynamic I taught in the SE trainings all the time, and it's just a really basic idea. Let's say you hear something on the news and you get really activated about it. And it's not that your activation is off the wall or weird. There's a lot going on. But so here's a spike of activation, let's say fear or anger, outrage, whatever, pops up here. Now we know when we watch waves at the beach, we know that unless something pushes it, the wave eventually has to come down and move on. Activation is the same way. Distress and any spike of a fear or anger or overwhelm, you've got to feed it to keep it up here. So I call this, here's a bonfire of activation. And it's really useful to know how you particularly add logs to that fire, keeping it up there. And there are a number of things that can add logs to a fire. The way you're thinking about it, I shouldn't have to feel this, I can't stand it, that's going to keep that wave up. Tension in the body, constricting and really being tense is going to add to that constriction. I guess those are two of the main ones. Feeding yourself fantasies about the feeling you're having. So you want to cultivate a practice of noticing how you may be adding to your distress. It doesn't mean, again, I don't mean any of this as a way to spiritually bypass feelings that need to be registered. It's just how can we feel something, acknowledge it, decide what you want to do about it, and then let it, as one colleague says, you can just ride that wave all the way to shore. You don't have to keep it up. You just let it ride itself out. That's why I think it helps to have statements that offer you the support of coming down again. One of the other things that's really important is times like these can really lead to what we think of in the trauma world as overwhelm leading to collapse. Like it's just too much, I can't take anymore. So all the energy goes right out of a person and you go into what's called freeze. I can't move, I don't want to do anything. One of the ways that I have worked to not feel helpless or overwhelmed. Now, again, this isn't something that would appeal to everybody, but I do quite a bit of subtle activism, which means I spend time visualizing. Like, for example, my most recent one I've been doing is sending out the rosy pink of universal love, not sending it out, but imagining the whole planet covered and immersed in universal love with every one of our earthkin of every variety soaking in the essence of universal love. And I do that particularly because I don't have a big enough brain to know what the exact right answers are. So I do this subtle activism, and then I hold the intention that the universal love will generate the greatest good for the greatest number. And I don't need to know what that is. But for me, and you can find your own way, that keeps me from going into collapse. That gives me a way each day to engage this current situation without feeling helpless about what's going on. There are people who would say, yeah, but it helps me and it keeps me regulated. So I want to offer any form of subtle activism that you particularly follow, whether it's prayer or affirmation or visualization. I really think not only does it keep us out of collapse, but you're adding to the collective. We're offering something to the collective. And I think, you know, my grandmother, who was my first spiritual teacher, used to tell me, she'd she would say, I didn't like this at all. She would say, now your soul has a purpose for being, but if something collective comes along, all bets are off. I didn't like hearing that as a kid. That was not reassuring at all. But lo and behold, here I am at the age I am now. I'm sliding into 75 very quickly. And I'm thinking back on what she told me. I still don't like it, but I'm seeing that it's true. In fact, we're all in this together. And so for me, doing subtle activism is a way to participate as a member of this collective where there isn't any there. We're all here and it's us and we are it. So I just encourage you strongly, find sources of inspiration and ways of being that actually invite you back into yourself, that invite you back to settling in yourself. So I guess now I'd just like to ask Diane what she might want to add, and then I have some specific practices to throw in here. But Diane, what's up in your thinking?
As I was listening to you, Nancy, and thinking about our conversation last week, what the two things that occurred to me, I completely agree with you about looking for sources of inspiration. It's been one of my most essential practices over the last, really since COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, part of that is making sure that I have ways of immersing myself in beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes visual beauty, it includes music, it includes poetry, things that will literally lift my spirit and counteract the heaviness that is so present in our collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really become a very, very central practice for me. Also, what you described as subtle activism, we had talked about many years ago when I studied with a man named Robert Fritz. Robert taught the creative process and using both the artistic creative process and metaphysical principles. And one thing that Robert would always talk about is that creating requires both inner action and outer action. So one isn't a substitute for the other. But especially these days when so many people are looking at what's going on in the world and feeling powerless, feeling, what we're up against is just too big and I don't know what to do. I literally don't know what to do to be helpful. When you don't know what outer action to take, we can always take action on the inner planes. And the question is really, we don't have a choice about whether or not to participate. We are part of this collective organism. And at any moment, we are either contributing the energy of our consciousness to what we want to see come into being, or we're lending the energy of our consciousness to what we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And making that as an intentional choice, checking in with ourselves over and over and over during the day, but especially when we start to feel discouraged and hopeless and disempowered, is I believe so crucial. My friend Meg Wheatley asks, who do we choose to be? And that includes as much the inner state that we bring
Absolutely.
to our lives and to the people we interact with. I'm so aware now in conversations with people when I engage in the ain't it awfuls, and it is. It's there's a lot of awful stuff, but is that what I want to be feeding?
Right.
Is that what I want to be feeding? And those are intentional choices that I believe have a real impact.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're saying that feels so important is we really do need to understand we are affecting each other in every moment. And the quality and tone of what we radiate into the world really matters.
Yeah, the other thing that occurred to me as you were leading people in this settling in, you and I had also talked about that place we all know inside of us. It's like the deeper, calm water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even when the surface of the water is choppy,
Mm-hmm.
there's a depth at which the water is still and calm.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about times that I had to make difficult decisions or choices that I knew at a certain point, I knew it was the right choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what the deepest truth was. I also knew that once I made that choice, there would be a lot of emotional turmoil and a lot of emotional upset and processing and healing that I would need to do. But even in all of that turmoil, there was like a deeper level of knowing this is right. This is right.
Yeah, yes, yes.
And so when you talk about steady presence, and I think that probably everyone here has had that kind of experience,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when there's been that deeper level of calm that comes from being centered in truth, even when the emotions may be roiling.
Mm-hmm. Well, in what you said, this feels so important. So glad you put this into words. The sense of rightness. We want to cultivate the willingness to notice and follow the sense of rightness, because, as you're saying, there can be times when you know there's a decision that needs to be made and everybody else is going, are you nuts? But that sense of rightness is so deep and so irresistible. That's, to me, that's one of our more important internal signals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's really beautiful. Thank you for that.
I love your image of not adding logs to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
I know that if I'm really honest with myself, there are times that I am just throwing log after
All of us.
log after log, and I may do it by watching yet the next show
Yeah, yeah.
on MSNBC after having watched 3 hours already, and I know that if I watch that fourth hour, I'm gonna
Hooked.
hit the boiling point.
Yeah.
And yet I do it. And there is, when I'm really truthful, there's something very seductive and very addictive
Yes.
about the state of activation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And unless we can honestly look at that, the craving for that,
Yes.
and decide, I read something that said the news, and this doesn't mean don't keep yourself informed,
Mm-hmm.
but the kind of obsessive, constant intake of the
Yep.
news is to the mind what sugar is to the body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know that's true for me.
For
I
all
know
of
that's true for me.
yes. Well, when I did this exercise in the trainings, people were dumbfounded at how much they didn't want to let go of what they were doing to feed the distress. It's just stunning. It's you're speaking for all of us because we do this all the time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's also so important, obviously, when we catch ourselves in that, when we I think Pema Chodron uses the Tibetan word shenpa, which is getting hooked. You can literally feel yourself getting hooked emotionally.
Yeah.
That when we catch ourselves doing that, even if in that moment we can't let it go, just to notice is a glimmer of awareness coming in and beginning the possibility of transformation. And
Well,
so to not beat ourselves up for
right. And it sets the tone for cultivating that that ability to notice. Now I do have to, I work all day long and they're not doing this. It's like, this is
well, it's the collective energy that we've generated, the energy field.
Well, and this is the scaredy cat of the three of them. She's the most scared. So here she is wanting the most attention. Yeah, I think that it's so important for us to have compassion for this kind of addiction we have. Not only, I mean, I love, it's so true. It's like sugar because it's our justification. It feels right and we want to express it. So cultivating the ability to let that go when we catch ourselves doing it is really important. And yes, we will not always succeed. I do. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking of something of Pema Chodron's that I read where she talks about committing to training for the rest of our lives in overcoming our reactivity.
Wonderful. Oh, that's beautiful and true. Yeah. Beautiful. And I think when we remember that our reactivity immediately aligns us with a collective that will magnify what we're feeling, even as we magnify the collective, it really behooves us. But always with compassion. To me, the adding into this, so I'm glad this is coming up because I do think our embracing self-acceptance more and more and more also adds something to the collective that is so healing. It's healing for ourselves, but adds such a profound gift to the collective. And so this is part of that process of being human. We've got all of it. We've got all of it.
So I'm thinking you and I could talk for hours, but
yeah,
I'm thinking that part of what's so powerful about these practices and tools that you teach, Nancy, is that by focusing on the body, it makes it easier to interrupt the thoughts, the stories that tend to be one of the ways we add fuel logs to the fire.
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering if you want to go into teaching some.
Absolutely. I have my list handy. So the first thing I want to teach is Peter Levine, who created or put together SE, Somatic Experiencing, uses a sound with people that, you know, at first people go, oh, big eye roll, give me a break. However, there's a lot of science behind this sound. And so I'm going to ask us to do it together and have you notice what happens in your body. All it is it's a very gentle sounding of vu. So we're going to do 3 vus. And I want to ask you to be gentle with it. We're not forcing a big loud vu, but check your body right now. See how it feels as you're right here with your body. And then I'm going to start and you can jump in and go with your own breathing rate. I'm going to go with my breathing rate, but notice that all you're doing is with the VU, you're allowing the breath to exhale. And then when it's finished, you take in a gentle breath, exhale. We're going to do it 3 times and just notice what happens in your body. Okay, so we'll start, and it's a lowish tone because you want vibration down your belly, down your whole abdomen. Okay. And when you finish, just take a moment to be with your body. This sound stimulates a relaxation response in what's called the dorsal vagal system. And just notice if your body has settled a little bit more. I now do this every morning as part of my regular practice. There is research at the moment on something called toning the vagus nerve. And toning the vagus nerve leads to all kinds of health effects. And this VU, which is a form of how we can tone the vagus nerve, really settles the system. So that's one thing you can do. Another is an EMDR approach that was created in way back when there was an earthquake in Mexico City. And EMDR people went to do their usual disaster work. And there were a bunch of children who were caught in this earthquake. And someone on the EMDR team created what is now called the butterfly hug. And when you're distressed, you just tap as you're feeling the distressed feelings. You tap a bit, and then you see if you're any better, tap a little more. After 9/11, those of us who were doing free sessions for people involved in 9/11 were using this, and all over New York City, you could see people on the subway doing this. It was amazing how many butterfly hugs were going on, just to regulate the system, to bring things kind of back into ease. Diane reminded me of one that Peter does, which, Diane, you'll have to tell me if I get the wrong hand under the, yeah. So, and then, oh, yeah, and just hold, but you're holding on your deltoid. This deltoid is an important stabilizing muscle. And so you can just do this and notice if this starts to lower your arousal. And one of these, when you're doing any of these self-touch kinds of practices, do it and then wait and notice how your body's responding. Give your body a little time to respond. Bodies don't rush through things. So settling can take its own time, and you just give it time to settle in. There are a couple of other self-touch routines, and let me do this so you can see it. So you can do your heart and your solar plexus, or your heart and your belly. And in this kind of support, the hand is offering support to the body for the body to use however it needs to. So you're not doing anything. We're not sending healing energy. We're not transmitting. You're saying to your body, my hands are here to support you in any way you need. And the body will know what to do. There's another very handy, the forehead and just at the curve of the skull. And you just bring your hand down to the curve of the skull. So you're getting the brain stem with that hand at the back and the frontal cortex with this one. And those times when your mind is buzzing and you just can't slow it down, this will offer some ease, actually. This is for when you're just like, and now one of our other senior faculty, Raja Selvam, has even said, if you know your brain's going, just hold. And again, you're just offering support for the body to use. This is the most important piece, is you're just offering support for the body to use. And I do think these days, these head holds can be very handy if we've watched too much. And this, I like the heart and solar plexus a lot. It just offers a kind of a quieter place to be. I'm just thinking if I've left out any of the ones. I think that's kind of basically it. The thing you want to do is, oh, and the other thing, this isn't self-touch, but bring your awareness when you're activated to the best you're able to, down, as I mentioned earlier, to the lower body, like feeling your butt in the chair, really planted, feet on the floor, and be sure you're like noticing that you have legs, because when we're really cooking, we're all up here, you know. Track for tension or constriction. If you notice it, allow yourself to soften, that nice Buddhist practice of softening. The other thing you can do that's really handy is heart math. It's a heart math variation that I just use of just breathing in and out through your heart. And if you were doing heart math proper, you'd be thinking about images of affection or love, but really just breathing in and out through the heart can be very useful. And one of the practices I do a lot is Tonglen, for those of you who know Tonglen practice. It's another form of subtle activism, but it also uses this breathing in and out through the heart that tends to ease the system and bring it down. Vu, you can carry with you anywhere. When I'm at the doctor, I'm one of those white coat people, and I go into a doctor's office and my blood pressure, like, right. So you better believe when they have me waiting for the doctor, I'm vooing the entire time. And there, you know, then blood pressure always looks very nice. So I voo when I'm out on the street, because in New York, who cares? You know, I just am voo. Of course, nowadays we have masks on, so nobody can see anyway. I voo all the time. It's my go-to settler when I'm feeling myself starting to get tense or tight. So I think that's about it. Diane, can you think of any I've forgotten? Leaning into the background of stillness also. Please create for yourself a background you can lean into that is absolutely there no matter what else is happening, whether it's stillness or steadiness or whatever resonates for you. It's an infinite field of whatever you can lean into. Really makes a difference to have that available.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that, you know, like this one,
Yeah.
a self-holding, that one of the things that Peter Levine has said about that is that it's creating a container. It's sort of, it allows us to feel the body itself as a container for our feelings.
Yes.
And the physical sensations that are part of our emotional experience, and makes me think of like the thunder shirts for dogs, or
Absolutely.
the weighted blankets
Yep.
that people are now buying that that
Yep.
feel so comforting. That it's almost like the sense of swaddling a baby. That there's a real experience of safety and comfort in being contained in that way.
Yeah, and one thing I might add too for this, because that's absolutely right. This body, if I want to go back for a second to self-acceptance, because you're reminding me of something. For those who are able and willing to do it, to take time in your practices to thank this amazing body for allowing your consciousness to be here. I mean, these bodies serve us in ways that are astonishing. And so this, having the container is beautiful, and remembering that the body is the skin is our boundary into the world, and we're held within our body, but also to bless this body and feel just the profound gratitude to be able to be here. I always find that's, for me, that's one of the most important practices. It's just every day to go, oh, thank you for letting me be here. And the fact that our bodies are not mostly human. We are a community of life forms making up these amazing bodies that allow us to be here. So we're all in a collaborative all the time on every level. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I think it would be lovely for us just all to take a moment to do that now.
Yeah.
To just express gratitude to these bodies.
Yeah. So beautiful.
For allowing our consciousness to be in this plane and moving around.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah.
So I think we just have time now for our closing song, and then we'll come back and express our gratitudes to each other. And during the song, if there is prayer that you would like to ask for, or prayer that you would like to offer to this world that is so profoundly in need of prayer and love at this time, please feel free to type your prayers or prayer requests into the chat, and we'll all be holding what's written. So, David, I think we can go to the song. So yes, that's Carrie Newcomer from her album, The Beautiful Not Yet. And that song is called Help in Hard Times. So thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thank you, Nancy, so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom and your kindness and your joy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's, David, we can unmute everybody, give everyone a chance to say goodnight if they would like to. Please take these tools with you, especially if you're going to watch the debate. It's a wonderful opportunity to practice.
Yeah.
When you
I'm going to share these with my students tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. Peace. Blessings, everyone.
Thank you.
Your presence is so nurturing and peaceful. Thank you.
Love you.
Love you all. It's great to see you all.